Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Uranio Paes.
And today we are talking about the Enneagram and teams and teamwork. We think it's so important how we work with others on teams, especially in today's world. We thought it would be really good to talk about, to devote a whole episode to talking about how each Enneagram type and each center of intelligence and how each dominant instinct relates to being on a team, being part of a team.
You know, I love teamwork, huh? And are you doing this episode for me?
I knew you would like this one, and I like it too. Both of us work with teams in business, and I know both of us are also sports fans. And I think we both also have a secret wish someday to be like the consigliere, the behind the scenes therapist coach to like a sports team, because we both like both teamwork and helping people understand how to work better together. And we also really like sports.
Yeah, one day we'll do that. If you listening to us have or participate of in an amazing sports team, let us know and we'll help you.
Yes, and we
So
yes, and we have gotten inquiries about like people who are coaches, like for even like at the collegiate level in different sports, talking about how the Enneagram has helped them and helped them coach their team. So we know that this may have wide ranging interest because almost everyone is part of a team, even if you're just kind of a team at home with your family, and so hopefully this will have relevance to a lot of people.
I'll hold myself back to not talk as much about soccer that I love. So I'll refer a little bit to many teams that I work with in business, but I'll be more general.
Yeah, yeah. And we both have a lot of experience applying the Enneagram with teams in business. You have probably a longer career in that. Like, I started off as a psychotherapist and then started working with teams more after a few years. But you have a lot of experience. That was really a big specialty of yours. So I will, if you don't cover everything, I'll ask you even more questions. And I think there will
Okay.
be some space to talk about international soccer because I know that we both find that very interesting, and so may people who are listening.
Okay. Let's go.
Okay, so why don't we start talking about the three instincts? We'll also talk about the centers as well as the nine types, and we'll throw some subtype stuff in here, here and there. If we talk too much about subtypes, this will be too long of an episode. Let's start talking about the instincts. So there are these three instincts in the Enneagram model. One that puts a person's focus more on self-preservation type issues and concerns. One that's more of a social instinct, that's a lot about relating to the collective or the group or the team. And one that's more about the sexual instinct, or in a business setting, we might call it a one-on-one instinct because it's about really focusing on individual relationships and bonding deeply with particular other people. And seeking kind of a special connection with particular individuals. So, why don't we start by talking about the self preservation instinct? And again, we'll mostly talk about people who are dominant in this, but we'll also add in some things about what happens when these instincts are repressed. And of course, I think mostly the social instinct being repressed will be something important to consider.
Right. So, self preservation dominance in the context of team building, team spirit, and more. It makes a difference if social second, like you're self-present with social second, so you're very happy with working with teams and also as a two. But in general, self-pres dominance have this kind of thought, yeah, okay, working with team, I can see it's good, but it's more about the benefits and the costs about that, and a little bit of a reasoning about what is it in there for me. And so there's this tendency to come back to the individual and to see what makes sense and do a cost benefit analysis. But also at times, especially if social's repressed, the self-preservation dominant person is might be very averse to teamwork, because it's more like a belief that if each person does their job, then all will work out well. And team building is a collection of individuals doing the right thing. So that's a bias for self preservation dominance. And it's a little bit harder for self pres dominance to get to that synergy that you can see in teams when 1 plus 1 is 3, because it's like I need to rely too much on myself, and it's harder to trust the other. And presses are more defended, so that might come in the way of self presses to do that. But then the self press repressed person usually goes a lot more for teamwork more easily, because they don't see themselves as separate from others. They don't see their individuality, and that's problematic for them because they lose track of their own interests and what's in it for them. They get lost either in another person within the team for sexual dominance or in the team itself. And then, for instance, if the person is a 9, even more so. But then the self-pressed, repressed person just trusts that everything in the team is fine, all problems will be solved, and there aren't as many problems. And they keep just this youthful, positive posture when it comes to team building, which helps a lot any team building process. But there is also this naivete. They don't usually see the some motives that other people may have, and they may sacrifice a lot for the team itself. And usually they can be excellent team members that don't necessarily step to the leadership position. They like to be more like one of all of them, although that's more common to the social dominant with self-pres repressed.
Yes, and what I'll just add is I think for self-preservation dominance, if things are challenging on the team, right? If there's difficulty, if things aren't going well, then I think the self-preservation instinct can cause a person to kind of withdraw into themselves, sort of like, I need to look out for myself. It's not safe. They can be suspicious of others. It can be a little bit more like, okay, I'm going to let go of the team motivation or the team focus and sort of circle the wagons a little bit around my own needs and what I need. Can happen if things are hard. And the only other thing I'll add is one of the best team experiences I ever had was when I was working at a restaurant. And when I was in graduate school, I worked in restaurants for many years as a food server. And there was one restaurant in particular I worked at in Palo Alto, California, in the US, where the teamwork was amazing. We would get very busy. It was a very popular restaurant, had a very popular bar, and it was an amazing experience of being more than the sum of our parts. And how what I particularly liked was everyone would help each other when they had any ability to do so. Right. So even though we were really busy, like you didn't have to do it all yourself. And to me, as a self preservation dominant, that was kind of a revelation that that could happen. Okay.
Yes, high performing teams are never forgotten by the person who participated in them, and they are rare. Like some studies say, it's 3% of the
Wow.
teams that reach that stage. And for all instincts and all types, that is an amazing experience. But for a self pressed dominant, having that experience is really encouraging
Yeah.
because they don't trust that easily.
Yeah, it was amazing. Okay, so let's say a few things about the social dominant instinct. So when a person's social instinct is more prominent, what how does that impact a person's experience of being on a team?
Basically, they are the ones who jump in first to say yes to teamwork, yes to team spirit, and let's go. And look, why don't other people see that? and we are here to be together and to have purpose and to build something as a team, not as individuals. So it's interesting that for in terms of motivation for work, for instance, especially in businesses, the self press, it's not motivation, but the self presses feel like they need to see if it's worth it from more concrete perspectives, including money, but not only. But socials are all about purpose, and they might lose track of, is this a good thing or not for me? Am I just seeking purpose, and am I getting into a rabbit hole here and a problem? So social dominants are blindly for teamwork, and they may lose themselves into it, and do that too much. So, for instance, I worked as a consultant for a company that predominantly had social dominant people, and they would have way more meetings than usual for companies, in which they need to build alignment, and everyone from all areas needed to be okay with everything, and they need to see how they could cooperate. And it was both wonderful and exaggerated. People, even the social dominants, will feel frustrated with how many talks they would need to have. Now, for social repressed people, there is this ironic, skeptical, and above all, cynical posture when it comes to team spirit. Deep inside, even if they don't say that, they go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, keep dreaming." And they think that teams can't get to that good place inside, that people will always betray others, that that isn't realistic, and above all, they feel trapped if they are only teens, because there is this unconscious big instinctual fear of being judged in the context of a team, and they feel overwhelmed by groups in general. So social repressed people, usually when I do team buildings, are the ones going against that effort. And it's very unconscious and very instinctive. So both for self-pressed dominance and for social repressed, the way into doing team building is do it while you observe how it's going. Like, test it out. Let's do a pilot project. Look inside, be realistic, look at evidences of how it's working, instead of me as a social dominant consultant just insisting that that's the way to go. So for social repressed people, the idea is, if you're a social repressed listening to us right now, see your skepticism and cynicism when it comes to thinking of the possibility of great teamwork.
Right. And I just want to add about social dominance, how seeing what's best for the team can be a huge priority, and even in the way they think. Sometimes when I do typing interviews and someone ends up being a social dominant, spontaneously they'll start talking about their team at work, or a team they've coached, or a team they've led. And you can see how important that is, how central it is to their focus, and in some ways what gives them meaning in life is how we work together, how we coordinate our efforts with others.
Right.
So, talking
Now,
about sexual instinct when it's dominant or
right.
one to one is the language we might use in a business setting.
Hmm. Yes. So sexual dominance or one-to-one dominance, uh, they might have a blind spot that while they think they are great in team building and in being in a group, because they tend to be a bit more expansive, usually a bit more outgoing, and outside, going outside towards others, they might think, oh, I'm good in team building. But if they observe themselves more in the subtleties, they will see that they relate to each person within the team context. And it's hard for them to see the team itself as an important entity. Although it's a bit more abstract, that exists. So it's hard for them to relate to the whole thing called team, and instead they go for to one relationships, which doesn't provide for everything needed in the team spirit. And also they are more selective. So teamwork requires this true value that everybody is as important as everybody else. And that's hard for a sexual dominant because, yeah, but I have my favorites. And yeah, but I'll connect to this person. And then I'll create this alliance, especially depending on the type, alliance to that person, and then start being a bit critical of someone on the team out of the tendency to build rivalry. So that's something that I see happening a lot with sexual dominance. But sexual repressed people, they are usually very easygoing and conflict avoidant. So to in the first stage of team building that we call forming, they are absolutely great, and they are easygoing. But then in the storming phase, they are the ones that tend to be conflict avoidant the most, and that might be problematic in that particular stage of team development when we need to allow conflicts to surface, and then we need to work on them more courageously and put them on the table and discuss. And then there's something about teamwork that requires intensity. Like in a sports team, you can see, for instance, a volleyball team. The ones that win the most are the ones that celebrate very big time each point that they score, and not just 1 point, let's go. And then sexual dominance lack that intensity that is needed in the teamwork.
So, just so everyone knows what Uranio was referring to just now, there is a stages of team development model that many people who work with teams know about, and it's the four stages are forming, storming, norming, and performing. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that you were talking about the forming stage and the storming phase. And I agree with everything you said. I think as a sexual repressed person myself, that the one-to-one instinct is repressed in me. I like the part where we're all getting along, and when conflict happens, unless I'm the one facilitating the mediation of it, it can be hard for me when I'm a member of the team. Yeah.
Right. And one more thing is that one good thing for sexual repressed people is that they don't want to stand above, which is something that is a good thing if you want to build team spirit. So I don't want anybody to be above anybody else, and especially myself.
Right, and I don't bring an excessive spirit of competition into, like,
Yes,
competing
correct.
with other people within the team. There is an
Yeah.
easier sense of, it actually feels good to kind of be part of a team where we're all equals and all working together. Whereas
Yeah.
I think sexual dominance, one-to-one dominance can sometimes have this sense of, I want to stand out, I want to win, I want to
Mhm.
be the most special, or they can bring a little bit more of an aggressive spirit to the situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk now about the nine types. But before each triad of types, according to the center of intelligence they're connected to, we'll also talk about what it means in that triad. For instance, we'll start as we usually do with the body types, types 8, 9, and 1. And before we talk about type 8, let's talk a little bit about body types generally. This is the people who overuse the gut center or the body center. They experience the world more in terms of the senses, in terms of doing versus feeling or thinking, and more in terms of experiencing things. What would you say about how body types generally experience teamwork and being part of a team?
Well, first, the body types, eights, nines, and ones, they just sense in their guts when there isn't the readiness on the team to be truly working as a unit, and they just sense that someone's not aligned, and they sense then in their guts, or like some bitter taste on the throat, and they don't swallow that thing that everybody is in it, and they need to provoke the situation so that that comes up, and that they allow the problem to surface. Another thing is that there are requirements in the body types point of view for teamwork to happen. So teamwork has those principles of how it works, but there are prerequisites that body types see. And what are they? Like, yes for teamwork, but each person needs to stay accountable. Yes for teamwork, but engagement needs to be full by everybody, and there needs to be fairness in everybody doing what's needed, and even compromising in a few things. So that needs to be fair. By the way, fairness is not a theme only for eights. It's for all body types, actually. It's that it's more visible for eights, perhaps a little more for eights in general, but it's a body type thing, actually. So they will be concerned with fairness, also the level of engagement and dedication and responsibility within the teamwork, and they are the ones that get truly bothered when someone is not working as hard as the others. Like I see soccer players that are leaders and their body types. Like I'm imagining here, remembering one of my favorite soccer players that plays for Manchester City now, De Bruyne, and he a Belgian soccer player, and I think he's a one, and he always gets mad at anybody when the person is not doing their best, and he's very serious, very diligent, and doing his part, and brilliantly.
Mhm.
So this is what I see in body types. What about you?
Yeah, I think that there's a sense body types have like a natural sense of what's needed in terms of structure, process to allow things to happen well or move things forward or to have things happen. And so there can be this sense of coming together, figuring out how it's going to happen, who's going to do what. There can be this real sense of the structure of the teamwork and how that happens. And they naturally bring just a gut sense of what's needed, what feels right, what doesn't feel right. And again, not just ones, but all three body types. We need to go in this direction. And like you said, kind of having a sense of when things aren't flowing, and what they might need to do, and they can be kind of like serious and effective in enforcing the what needs to be done to come together as a team at the level of the work or the process.
Yeah. Shall we talk about eights?
Yeah, let's talk about eights. What would you say in terms of, what people might find interesting or need to understand about eights and teamwork?
So we're making this agreement here, and I'll keep an eye on you in case you don't follow it. And I'm ready to go against you if you don't comply. So vengeance and seeing the injustices even more
That's what
so.
eights would say, or the
Yeah,
posture they take on a team. Mhm.
exactly. And also, eights will try to be the example of dedication
Mm,
and the zest for victory, and to get there and to
mhm,
fight opposition, usually the opposing team or the competitor in the business. So when they trust the team spirit, which might take longer and more time than for other types, but when they do, they try to unite the team against something else. It's us together against. So that's also for sixes, but I do see that a lot for eights. So they need to have an opposition to fight. Even if it's like, we'll fight our own sloth, we'll fight our own accommodating perspective of things, and we'll fight our tiredness and we'll excel. So excel, excel. It's something that we can go beyond, and we must keep going. Come on, find energy. And they tend to be very bold in terms of the team goals, and but also in terms of the expectations from each team member. They might exaggerate, and then they buy very easily the team's needs, as if they need to protect the team, and also like they they buy other people's wars within the team, because they
Buy?
suppose
What do you
everybody.
mean? You
Yeah,
mean
sorry for my English. Probably
they buy into or
like
they support
buy
everybody's?
into, like they think they make themselves responsible
Ah.
for things that should be other people's wars, so
Mhm.
they don't allow other people to step up and take responsibility to address something hard to be addressed, or having difficult
Mhm.
conversations, or to go up there to confront someone else. And then that might not go too well for them, and it's a recipe for frustration when they see that there is no reciprocity, that when they need someone to back them up, the person won't be there.
Right, right. And again, I think I'm hearing there are some real good things that each type brings and some ways they can get frustrated or have issues on teams. I think eights bring a huge amount of just natural commitment, like especially if things don't go badly, they bring a lot of energy, right? A lot of energy to meet challenges together, and a lot of dedication to doing the work that it takes, right? So I think they can almost provide a lot of, like, almost the engine to help the team engage and move forward together and get big things done and not be deterred, not be discouraged if there are challenges, but kind of rise up together to meet them. I do think that eights can get frustrated if, for instance, there's a leadership vacuum. Let's say the leader's not doing a good job and the eight isn't the leader. That can be particularly hard for the eight because they sense that, that they sense a vacuum in leadership. Now, on the good side, they might move in to do that, and if that works with the team, that would be good for them to almost take on an informal leadership role if they're not the formal leader. But of course, that they can also get frustrated in ways that cause problems, right? Especially if the team has some real dysfunctions, the eights can also really register that and really suffer from it. Because they can so easily see for themselves like how we could be moving things forward, and if things aren't working right, like if, let's say, the leader is a type who's not making decisions quickly or who's vacillating on things and not taking action, that can be particularly hard for an eight on a team if they're not the leader. And I think eights do bring a natural leadership quality to teams because of all we're saying. But it's important to remember that eights don't need to be the leader. Eights will often say, if there's good leadership in place, I'm happy to be someone who's supporting the effort and not leading the charge. So let's talk about nines. Type nine. What would you say about type nine on a team?
Well, they naturally dedicate a lot of attention to the external needs, including other people's needs, and therefore they are happy to be helpers on the team level, and even more of that decision to not stand above others. And that bears some problems also, because differently than eights, they many times will not step into the leadership role that's needed, even if they are called to do that. And sometimes they shy away from being shy away yeah sorry for shy away from being more central and more decisive in doing stuff. And they might at times slow down a little bit some processes in the team building thing, but not always. Sometimes they're just happy, but it's different to just embody the thing of moving forward as opposed to just going along. So it's a matter of, are you there for the team just following the good things that are happening after they do? or are you truly helping making things happen, like new things happen? Now, another thing about nines in the context of teamwork is that they might come up with some difficulty when they see someone or some people on the team doing something that they consider to be wrong. And then they unconsciously start uh, having some passive aggression stance, as in, I'm not going to cooperate with this team effort anymore, and I'll go against that. So, out of stubbornness and anger, and through passive aggression. So, the same type that may be one of the best team players in the beginning might become a really not so good team player if they are uh, unconsciously angry inside.
Yeah, I'm realizing as we talk that it can be a different story for these types depending on whether the team is functional and healthy and cohesive, or if the team isn't doing so well, if it's a more of a dysfunctional team, if things aren't going well. And so maybe we can put some things in about that as we have already. I would say with type 9, I think they're natural, like you said, natural good team players, right? Why? Because they put the focus on everybody getting along, creating harmony, everybody being listened to, everybody being included. Now, sometimes they can leave themselves out a little bit, right? So they may also, on the downside, not always say their opinion. They may be really good at listening to everyone else and even creating, kind of a mediation role for themselves by helping other people get listened to by other team members. But sometimes they may hold back in terms of putting themselves forward in some ways that sometimes can be very important. So, on the one hand, they can really help the team be in harmony and work well together and be true, like humble supporters of the team effort. But then on the downside, they can be indecisive if they get the feeling that the leadership is being too autocratic or they're not respected. They might silently, quietly put the brakes on and get stubborn and get in the way of positive team efforts or not being able to decide. And if they're the leader and they're sitting on the fence and not, making things happen, that can be particularly problematic.
Yeah.
So let's talk about type 1.
Yeah, so I think that type 1, when they trust that everybody is going to do their part with accountability, and they are really aligned, and there are processes that are clear, then they become very diligent in doing the necessary teamwork, and they may become role models in that, in doing the right thing. At the same time, they keep an eye on what's not working more than on what's working. And that many times means, what is it that the other person's doing that's not quite based in the rules that we have set for this thing called teamwork. And then they might become a little bit aggressive when it comes to appraising the person, even if that aggression is a bit more indirect, and not as much in passive aggression as the nine, but in that contained, more intense, pure anger. Now, in teamwork, I see that ones, especially social ones, but ones in general, try to model what they believe everybody else should do. And then they exaggerate in that. And then one thing I observe, that in ones become the very best possible of what they believe everybody should be, but they will still have higher standards and higher bar for everything, and then they become so good in what they do that they become irreplaceable, like very hard to move up or move out, because the team depends on them to do everything. And then there is this tendency that they end up doing the things that others on the team don't want to do, and resentment mounts and becomes bigger and bigger. And then the one starts losing the willingness to do teamwork and starts doing all themselves, and then, vicious cycle. They end up being even more stuck in doing all they are doing and not moving up or out.
Right, right. Yes, I think, like you're saying, ones can be natural team players in that they can really create a vision of the way forward, of a really ideal outcome, and they can really be people who really want to get in there and do the work. That they're not afraid of hard work, that they can be, if they're dedicated and behind the team effort, it can be very much like, let's do it. And here's the way to get there. And they can provide a lot of guidance and a clear sense of what the right way is to do something or what some good ways might be. But of course, if they get too self-critical, if they aren't expressing any anger that builds up, and they can act that out passive aggressively, they can get critical, they can sort of withdraw in anger, or like you're saying, there can be a way that they um, don't delegate and take on too much of themselves. They take on too much work that they do themselves instead of, allowing others to share the load, and they can get more and more resentful in a way that leaks out in the way other team members see it. And then, of course, sometimes they can get into a place of frustration because they see there's one right way, and if other people aren't seeing the same way as right, it can be hard for them to see how a different way is good enough. So there can be, again, both really a lot of positives, but also some difficulties. Okay, so let's talk about the heart types. Any general things you want to say about heart types and how they relate to teamwork?
So hard types, they need more feedback, both for self and for the team, as in, is this working? Like, they need some external approval and reassurance that what's happening is having a good impact and a positive perception by other people. And they bring up important dimensions of not only reaching achieving goals, but also being admired by other people, and that helps. And at the same time, it might become a dependency on other people's opinions. And within the team, hard types many times do do the thing of putting the finger on issues when someone is not feeling well, or when the team
Morale?
morale when it's not the best. So they feel that more easily. And I'd say even when social is not dominant, because that impacts people's emotions, and they perceive that. And then they touch the problem and try to address that. In this sense, I think that heart types are always the truth tellers in the team context of something that's not quite working for someone, or someone needs to be met and helped in the team context. But also, a very good thing about hard types in teamwork is that I think that in general they get excited, passionate, and they celebrate, even though three, for instance, might not dedicate too much time for celebration, but they tend to be sort of intense and happy. So I think that on the team context, hard types are very much needed to sustain the spirit itself.
Mhm.
Because one thing is the instinctual team spirit that comes a little more from the social instinct. But another thing is a more emotional relation with the very idea and practice of teamwork. And that is provided a bit more by heart types. And finally, I'd say when there is failure or some downsides, hard types in general help process that. Of course, there is the three that avoids being in touch with failure, but in general, as you explained, the dominant emotion there is sadness, and that sadness can be used for processing uh, pitfalls and things that happen that are not good, and then they help the team come out of that stage many times and go again for the goals and achieve in the future. So process learnings, but not much from a mental analytical perspective, and more like let's work on our motivation and let's get back to that ideal and purpose that we have all decided we're going to share.
Yeah, I think that heart types naturally feel the mood on a team, how people are feeling relating to each other and working together. And that's an important component that not all types are tuned into. And I think, on the one hand, like you say, heart types can really help make sure that people are feeling good and address issues that get in the way of a good team spirit. Sometimes it can be hard for heart types on teams because they are really in touch with their emotions. And if that's not getting talked about, or if it's a team setting in which you're not really supposed to talk about emotions or there's no space for that, that can be frustrating and hard because it's like, okay, we're not allowed to talk about emotions. And, even though that's changed a lot in the last years, there can still be many team settings, especially in business organizations, where you're not supposed to be too emotional, where it's hard for heart types to function well on a team if there's not an ability to surface or discuss what's happening on the emotional level of things. Okay, so let's talk about twos.
Mm. Would you like to start talking about this one for obvious reasons?
Well, maybe, okay.
Or I can start if you
Yeah,
prefer.
maybe
I
you
mean,
start and I add. Yeah.
okay, so I see that choose are usually very positive influencers within the team and teamwork, and they see people's needs and go there to back them up and help them out. And at the same time, they're positive, they celebrate, and they can just help the team go a level up in terms of being upbeat. And they are naturally people who cooperate and who work for others, which is something that is required on the team spirit. Like people helping each other is one of the hints of a high performing team. On the other hand, I think that choose can create too many hidden agendas and behind the scene things happening and talking about one person with the other person and creating some problems as that goes on, and being like the power behind all that's happening. So, and also in the team, especially in business, I see that either the two truly engages with the tasks ahead and gets more technical because they have like been told or learned that they need to contain their emotions, or they become very emotional and then they stop the natural flow of problems and challenges within the team's development by bringing up too many times the problems that are happening. And there is the thing about making themselves vulnerable and asking for help, which is are things that are needed on teamwork.
Yeah, I think twos bring a real sense of wanting people to have good relationships with each other, wanting people to have a positive experience of being on a team and doing work together with others, and bringing a lot of positive attitude, supportive spirit, a sense of wanting to contribute in good ways to making other people happy. And so I think that often goes a long way, especially because there is this spirit of wanting to support others to make all that happen. Now, of course, twos focus can focus too much on others and how others are feeling, and not enough on how they're feeling. And sometimes it can be hard to bring their needs out on the table, what they think. But that's obviously a growth opportunity for a two on a team. And I also think there is some conflict avoidance. Like, what happens when you're not getting along with someone? It can be very hard to confront the situation proactively with a positive spirit. It's something where it's like, ooh, there can be a withdrawal, or a sense of anxiety, or not sure how to do this, right? Because relationships are so important, and because there's a lot of a sense of wanting to get along with others. But if a two can see the team as a path for growth, of being able to be more proactive, come forward with their own needs and concerns, and lean into conflict, and also turn down the volume on needing everyone to like you. That then they can do well, I think, on teams.
Mm, right.
Type three. What would you say about type threes on teams?
So, cutting to the chase, the thing is, threes of all subtypes have this tendency to be individualistic and to want to work on under the basis of meritocracy. Meaning, if I dedicate myself more than others, I need to be better compensated or better praised or having more benefits. And I do things myself that excel stuff. So, for instance, athletes that are threes typically arrive before others in training sessions and stay for longer, even if the manager or coach doesn't require for that. That they just make more efforts. They go like 110%, while other people might get to 100. One example that comes to my mind from soccer is Cristiano Ronaldo from Portugal. That whoever reads a little bit about his tendencies and how seriously he works will see what I mean. Now, because there is this individualistic mindset, it's a little bit harder for threes to jump into the philosophy of teamwork only. And the bias is some threes, depending on the level of awareness, might unconsciously come from a belief that the team is that set of people that will help me be successful. So, those interviews with athletes that they say, they are asked, you have been the man of the match and you're amazing, being one of the best ever. And then they say, well, I need to say that it's all because of the team. If it wasn't for the team, I would never achieve this. And that sounds to me at times politically correct, but an indirect message that, yeah, the team has been working really well for me. So it's a little bit of what threes need to watch in terms of their egos in the team spirit, and the risk that if things go badly, they will start accusing others, because it's very hard for me to face failure. At the same time, when people are interested in being more successful, the threes are there for them first before anybody else. Threes are willing to help others excel. And if teamwork is seen as the thing that is not only what we are choosing to do, but also what's in fashion, then they will go for it, adapting their own personality tendencies to like shape shifting into the best team workers of all.
Right, right. And it's so interesting. I love the topic of teamwork. I really believe, and I love it when it happens when in the sports world, the team that wins the championship is the team that had by far the best teamwork, right? That where people were unselfish. Unselfish team play, I think, is something that's a beautiful thing to watch. I remember in past World Cups, and you might not like that I say this. I use this as an example, but I remember there were a couple of years when Germany's national team in the World Cup got a lot of credit for their unselfish team play. Because it was like it was more they were all in it together. They were young players and there were no big stars. I just love that when that happens. So I just kind of wanted to name that. Not that that has everything to do with threes, but it's just, and I don't think it always happens that way that the team with the best teamwork wins the championship, but I often think it does, especially because I think humility plays a big role in teamwork. But to get back to threes after that tangent, I would say that threes, it really depends. I think threes are so focused on getting to the goal. Sometimes they can get a little bit narrow focused, where it's all about me and my goal. And then I think they can either be a good team player if it's a functional team and everyone's helping them get to the same goal, if they all have a common goal, if there's alignment, then they can be good team player because everyone's sort of rowing in the same direction and rowing as fast as the three is. But I think that if threes, probably of any type, have the highest intolerance of what they would judge as incompetence. So if they see other people aren't doing a good job in their view, if they think other people aren't doing their part to get to the goal, sometimes they can get frustrated and judgmental and focus even more on sort of who's getting the credit or on their own thing. But I think when a three is a team player, like I've seen some social threes, for instance, that really genuinely want the team to meet the goal and want the team to get the success, then I think they can be amazing because they can really be motivated to make sure everybody's coming along. Although I usually think that's a three who's got to maybe a little bit more at a higher level of awareness, like you said. And of course, they can get competitive within the team. They cannot talk with others in the team if they get a little bit too focused on what they're doing. But a good reminder for threes, I think that often you go faster together. And so it can help them motivate them to develop more of their interpersonal relationships with other team members as a way of being effective. Okay, so let's talk about type four.
Yeah, fours see the downsides of the team and express what's not working, and they might also feel like they lack something that other people on the team have in a way that undermines at times the team spirit, because it's not the spirit underneath team spirit to compare. And the idea for force is that also we always need to be creative, and that really boosts the team forward, because it's not only about doing the right thing, it's about envisioning something greater for all of us, something differentiated, and that's pretty much needed. When you talk about team building and team spirit, you need, it's like one of the things that is needed is, let's trust the impossible, let's go for the impossible. And I see that fours are one of the types that contribute to that mindset the most. not by being only like idealists, but also by raising the bar and calling everybody to dream again and to aim high, both in pure achievement and quality of the delivery. Now, fours, when uh, integrate in a team spirit, they need to go outside themselves and see others, and that's not too easy for fours. So it requires the four to do some inner work in seeing the other person and doing things for the other, which is not the most natural thing for fours, but they can do it, and when they do, brilliant.
If they can value the other person's vision or work product or quality of effort, then I think that helps. I will say about fours, I think that they function especially effectively on a team if they sense that everybody on the team shares a common vision of a common creative vision of what the goals are, what the values are, what the purpose and meaning is of what they're doing. I think if there's a shared sense of that, I think then the fours particularly do well. I also think if there's good communication in the team, like people are being honest about what they really think and feel, people listen to each other, especially if the four feels that their perspective is being heard and understood, then I think they can work very well on teams because, again, they're sensitive to the interpersonal dynamics and the emotional undercurrent within a team. Now, I do think that one of the things that fours can bring to a team, if they are listened to, is being that truth teller who names the elephant in the room, who just intuitively knows here's what we're not talking about, here's what we're avoiding, here's why we're having the problem we're having. It's because we're not surfacing this conflict or this dysfunction underneath. I think to many teams will not be very open to that message, right? To seeing the shadow of the team, to seeing the elephant in the room. But if they are, then I think the team can value what the four brings in terms of saying, here's what we may not be seeing that we might usefully pay attention to in order to overcome a challenge that we might be having. And so if the team is not open to that message from a four, I think the four can have a lot of struggle on the team. Also, I've talked to fours in organizations like high tech organizations that feel like they're really not understood or heard, and it's very hard for them. And sometimes I've coached them just around, they're having a different experience of you. They don't experience things on the emotional level. And sometimes fours need to, and some kinds of business teams need to adjust their expectations and their perspective on what's possible in terms of team interaction. Okay, head types. Let's talk about the head types.
Teamwork needs to make sense. The principles of it need to be well explained, and they need to see that it applies to the moment and it applies to the needs that are not only the teams but also needs of the whole system, macro system around the team. So they need to understand the reasons why investing in more team spirit, and also what it takes, like the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So analysis, and also they need to understand the dynamics of team development. And when they do, wow, they engage. So as for everything else, the three head types, fives, sixes, and sevens, they need to be educated about teamwork, not from the perspective of complying or doing the right thing, but more about getting on board and supporting the efforts of the team spirit. Now, they may celebrate less, with the exception perhaps of the seven, but they may plan too much and not do things as much, and perhaps be more theoretical when it comes to what we need to do as a team. So it's good for head types if they engage with a little bit more pure action without as much predictability. And one last thing I want to say is that head types find it hard to deal with ambiguity. And if things are not very clear in how we're going to do the thing and why and what exactly, if those answers are uh, not don't exist to these questions, then it's hard for them to go along with the team spirit. So one thing that head types like, or many times even need, in whatever thing, not only teamwork, is what we in business call, I think, the 5W1H, which is asking the six questions: when, who, what else?
Where, what,
Where, what, and
and
then the
how.
how.
Mhm.
Yeah, how is the H. So I missed one W here, but I think people get
What,
the spirit.
who, where, when, how. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is another W that I miss now. Anyway, this is about the head types. What do you think?
Why? Yeah,
Yeah,
why?
why? Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, I think there may need to be some logical explanation given for instance, team building efforts or things that need to be done in order to enhance team cohesion, that get explained because it may not be intuitively obvious to head types. Being a little bit more in their heads and not as relational or as process oriented. And so I think if that's explained, then head types can definitely get on board. But like you said, it has to make sense. There has to be kind of a logical explanation that gets addressed explicitly about how what we're going to do to work together well as a team. And you bring up the stages of team development. I think that's the kind of thing that you're really good at working with as a head type because it's this model, that we can kind of understand how teams develop based on this sort of mental model of how things happen.
Yeah, so they are good in assessing where the team is and what they need.
Right. Okay, so why don't you start telling us a little bit about type fives on a team?
Well, I think that when it comes to teamwork and type 5, it's almost like 5 is a walking contradiction when it comes to building team spirit. And perhaps the type that is the hardest to comply with teamwork, because fives find it necessary to do many things by themselves. Like it's hard to do brainstorming because I first need to think about things myself. It's also hard to make decisions before I go process what we are talking about now. It's hard to be spontaneous in discussing stuff in the meeting. And I need to prepare, and the preparation needs to be alone and not out of a conversation with others. So that undermines team spirit because reality is that the other eight types will probably don't work the same way. Now, I
Especially
do.
twos.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
and thank you
and
for saying all that. I feel very empathized with indirectly as a teammate of a five. So just
I'm
I hope
very
you
glad.
have a little more sympathy for me in my daily life.
Yeah, sure. And I'm glad you see that. And after the podcast, I'll dedicate some time in thinking of what you just said. No, that having said that, social fives may be very different, but still they are fives. And I see myself historically, maybe not as much today for different reasons of my own, but historically, I've always been a good team player, and I've always chosen team settings rather than individual work. I've always liked more collective sports than individual ones, both for myself when I practiced and watching. So, and I love understanding the dynamics of teams, but still, I have many of these tendencies of, retaining several things that I want to do by myself. So it's hard. And at the same time, it's not an absolute concept for all fives. And fives sometimes use the team context to be able to connect to people more easily because there is less intimacy when it comes to teamwork. It's not like getting in front of one person and having a deep talk about what I want and need. It's not as challenging, although sexual fives might find that even easier than doing that on the teamwork. But what I mean is, if I need to be out there in the world, relating to this abstraction called team might be easier than relating to that concrete person in front of me. So paradoxes, and I think that what is great about fives in teams is that they they are reasonable. They don't get despaired for
They don't get
anything.
despairing.
Despairing, thank you. And they, I think we do a good teamwork in me getting to a better level of English. Thank you. The thing is, the five also can really help a team by having, keeping thinking straight, but also in the sense of being a good confidant. Like if people are having trouble, either individually or about the team spirit, they sometimes go self disclose that with a five. They can keep secrets, and at the same time, they see what's happening and they listen with a lot of attention to what the other person has to say, and many times provide good advice.
And I think there is a benefit in not taking things too personally and being a little bit removed and being able to assess what's happening with a little bit more distance. I think sometimes that can be a positive, although with your good inner work, you become more emotional, and so maybe that becomes a new thing on the scene. But I thank you for all you said about fives. I feel, like I said, I feel empathized with. And I also hear what you're talking about in terms of yourself as really reflective also of your social instinct. I think that's so big for you, the social instinct. And so I think I won't add too much more. I think you covered it well. So let's talk about type six.
So sixes are natural team players in my view, like 80% of the sixes at least. And I think they get the spirit of cooperation more easily than many other types. And they have this very good quality for teams that at the same time they trust, they comply, and they see the issues and they talk about the issues. So it's a good combination. And many times sixes are seen as very positive influences within the team when it comes to creating or doing teamwork and creating the team spirit. This is my experience with sixes. When I do team building work, I usually find that after a certain period of questioning, the type 6 person becomes one of the biggest allies to what needs to be done in the context of the team. Having said that, sixes keep an eye on each person and on the fact that the teamwork may not be going well. And I think that inadvertently brings some lack of motivation for people who don't work the same way that sixes do. Some people need more like trust first and the problems will be solved. And these people don't work like the six that keeps bringing issues to the table and pointing out to problems that are happening. So overall, I think that sixes are really good though when it comes to teamwork.
Yeah, I think sixes can be great on a team, both in terms of what they contribute and everybody's experience of the team, if their personality is understood by others, right? Where I've done a lot of work with teams and companies, and what I often find is that there's problems with the six until they realize that's a six, right? Because oftentimes people experience the six as being sort of pessimistic or poking holes in things or dwelling on problems or always focusing on what's not working, and that often creates a tension within a team of like, hey, why is this person such a downer? And then what ends up happening is when people find out, oh, this is what a six is, and this is what they bring to the team that we need, that isn't easy, right? It's not easy to sort of go against what's happening or raise all the problems or say, wait a minute, we have to prepare for this or that, or thinking in terms of worst case scenarios or being a contrarian. That's not an easy role to play, but it is an important role. And once people understand what that is, if the six is well understood within the team, then usually I think that the six gets valued, right? Because they're also very naturally humble. They're not needing to be the one who gets all the attention or all the credit. But I do think that there's a naturally occurring thing where there can be this buildup of a lack of goodwill sometimes, and sometimes I think this six can even get scapegoated a little bit, like they're the problem somehow, only because they're the people who see the problems and identify the problems and have a hard time staying quiet about the problems, right? And so it's almost like the six gets a bad rap. I remember I worked with one team and it ended up being mostly sevens, and then there was one six and then a few of the other numbers, like a couple threes, a two, a five, but there were like seven sevens on the team. And after that, before the team session, all these guys didn't like the six, and he had kind of a hard time on that team. After it, everyone loved him. They're like, oh, now we get it. Normally he would stop them from running down, running too quickly into something or having a good idea and going into action too quickly. He would say, wait a minute. And before that team session, they were resentful of him. And after the team session, they realized they needed him. And he was really important and played an important role. So that's just an example. Okay, let's go on to type seven, last but not least.
Yeah, they help teamwork by being enthusiastic, excited. I'm up for this new thing of working together, and let's all enjoy together, but also let's create new and new ideas for us, and let's move on, be dynamic, and never get stuck in any kind of place. And that is usually very good, but it becomes excessive for some people, like also avoidant of problems, and just sticking to a plan and a routine, and sometimes sevens change things even when there shouldn't be any change. But there is a problem also about the self-referencing tendency for sevens, and sometimes finding it a bit harder to have empathy and develop the true capacity to look at other team members, and they think a little bit too much about themselves in that context, although it's way more for a self-pressed seven than a social seven. But it's a type that is in touch with like what I want, what I prefer, what gives me pleasure. And the teamwork requires a little bit more of that thing. I see you, and I'm here for you, and I can be with you if you're struggling, not only trying to be upbeat and take you out of the state you are, but holding you and welcoming you talking about your own challenges and more.
Yes, I think sevens can be great on a team because a little bit like us twos, they want people to have a good experience. They want things to be positive. They like to keep the morale up. They want it to be fun and enjoyable and pleasurable. And I think that they bring that spirit to the team. And they're sometimes the one who's making jokes and bringing some of the fun, which can be really important for a team. But then I also think that because they bring that obvious quality that people like and that they like in themselves, sometimes the downsides that sevens bring to teams aren't as obvious. And like you said, it's being too a little bit like addicted to the idea stage, to having good ideas and fun brainstorms, and not doing the work at the end of the brainstorm of really getting serious about, okay, what's practical to actually achieve, and how are we going to go into planning for the actions to make that happen. I do think self-preservation sevens actually are a little bit better at that, but it can be hard for them to stick with the boring parts, stay engaged through the tedious stuff, or they can be sensitive to getting bored by what's happening, and they can disengage, or they can resist if they feel like they're being made to do something they don't want to do, or being limited in any way. They don't like the hierarchy of things, and so sometimes they can almost think a little bit too outside the box and be a little bit too creative, or need too much freedom, and not kind of come together and do the teamwork that's not the fun part, that's not always completely enjoyable. They can want to disengage from a difficult conversation that needs to take place in order for the team to keep working together well. And sometimes I notice when I've worked with teams that people get frustrated with the seven, and it's hard for them sometimes to have the conversation about what they're doing that's having a negative impact as well. Okay, very interesting conversation about teams and Enneagram types and centers and instincts. We want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll stay tuned and join us next time for the Enneagram 2.0 podcast, where we talk about all things Enneagram.